Yes, today we've devoted our entire show to reptiles, and I'm pleased to have the publisher and owner of Fauna magazine joining me. Fauna is a respected publication dedicated to the world of reptiles and has been referred to as a cross between National Geographic and Nature magazines. Joining me is Bob Smith, who not only is the man behind Fauna, but he's also the president of a hardware and software provider for the banking industry called the Wright Financial Group. We're in for a real treat as Bob shows us some of the most beautiful reptiles he's brought. And we also see samples of some of the magazine's top-rated photography. Thanks, Bob. I certainly do appreciate it. We have a little guy on my shoulder here. Why don't you kind of introduce who this one is? I mean, he's really neat.
He's about to take off, too.
Well, let's see if we can get him. Oh, come on over here, little one. And I'll put him up here so the folks can see him.
Yeah, that's a friend of ours who we have resident in our offices in Hop Hog. That is called a Waxy monkey frog, not your normal pet fare, but an animal that is from South America, in particular the Paraguay region. It's got some very interesting characteristics for an amphibian in that most amphibians are water-loving creatures. This particular monkey frog is known again as the Waxy monkey frog because he's developed the ability to actually coat his body in almost an SPF 500 type of sun protection through a gland that's located on his underbelly.
And if you can see, I think we can show, if we can turn him around, you can see how shiny he is on the top. I guess this is the... there we go. See that
that's the waxy coating. And most frogs, local frogs that you see on Long Island, if they sat out in the sun for any length of time, would actually fry in a short period of time because they're not adapted to that. This frog lives in a dry, very hot, 100-degree area, sits all day long in almost a gargoyle-type position. After rubbing that waxy coating, it actually cocoons itself, so it is impervious to the sun. It sits all day long. It's a nocturnal creature, comes out at night, and forages for food.
And it's got the softest skin. I mean, when you think of frogs, you think of a little bit of a rough texture, but these guys are really smooth.
Another characteristic, as you see, he's unlike most frogs you anticipate to be hopping across the studio. They tend to move very slow and stalk their food and walk. Mm-hmm. He has the ability to hop, but primarily he's a walking frog.
And his feet are kind of like tree frogs, where they're almost like little suction cups?
Exactly. He doesn't have exactly a cup, but he does have a grasping ability. That's the common name for this, is the Waxy monkey frog. Has characteristics almost like a monkey's face or a primate's face. And not the ability to grab, but the ability to latch on.
Now, you've been really able to kind of, your dream of being a reptile enthusiast, turn it into a magazine. How did you do this? Or, well, what got you started on this?
Well, what got me started is moving from Manhattan as a 6-, 7-year-old. My parents moved me out to Babylon, New York, where literally the first week I was out there, a garter snake cut across the front lawn. And much to my amazement, everybody else in the neighborhood seemed to be afraid of it. I had just this natural instinct immediately to pick it up and look at it, much to my mother's dismay as she came flying out of the kitchen and said, "Put that thing down," and people assuming that all snakes are poisonous. Obviously wasn't the case. It was a harmless garter snake that is still quite prevalent throughout Long Island. And I was fascinated not only from the creature itself, but more so from the people's reactions to it, as everybody was afraid. So I was interested from that point on, and I've always maintained an interest in these animals.
How does your wife Diane deal with all these critters that you bring home?
I have to say she's getting better. She likes the ones that are vegetable eaters, like the iguanas, and we have a wide menagerie at our home of tortoises that eat vegetable matter. Those are the ones she kind of gravitates towards.
Now, you've moved a lot of your pets into your office since you started the magazine. What about the folks who work with you? I mean, how do they feel about having all these animals there?
Well, there's a natural fear a lot of people have with snakes, and we do keep a lot of large boas and pythons, which I'll show you later. So we try to keep the people that aren't exactly as exuberant as we are away from them, and they're in my office. But animals such as this, and I'd have to say to a person, not only have we taught the local people people in our office that there's nothing to fear with these animals, we have an awful lot of visitors, and people come through, children come through and see them, and they're all in cages on display, impossible to hurt anybody if they could. So the staff has helped me immensely as far as the husbandry of these animals, which is quite intense to some of the species. They need very specific care, different types of lighting, and a wide variety of food to keep them healthy.
Wonderful little pet. Tell us a bit about the magazine, Fauna. How did you get started with that?
Fauna is a magazine that actually has been around for a long, long time. It was started back in 1939 by a famous herpetologist. Herpetology, of course, is the study of reptiles and amphibians. A fellow named Dr. Roger Conant, who is now in his 90s. He started the Fauna magazine with the Philadelphia Zoo. And it's taken on many incarnations over the years. Ours is actually now the fourth version of Fauna, if you will. There was an unsuccessful try in the 70s from a museum out in California, and the last couple of years, back in '97, a group of herpetologists launched it. I just happened to be fortunate enough to be on a Costa Rican eco-travel trip with these fellas, and my business acumen came to play. I said, what would it take to start that again? And here we are now in our 6th issue and in our 2nd year, and we're doing great.
The pictures are absolutely spectacular. I mean, I think they definitely rival any I've ever seen in National Geographic or in Nature. Why don't we show some of the pictures to the folks so they can really appreciate some of the gorgeous photography work?
Yeah, here we have fauna, of course, is Animalia, or the animal kingdom. So we don't only have reptiles and amphibians. There's a wide variety of animals grace our pages. We just like unusual. Here's a fish from the Hong Kong reef that was in a recent issue of Fauna. We have a large group of insects represented every single time, or invertebrates. This was an article about dragonflies called damsels and dragonflies, of which there are thousands of different types. This is a famous picture, actually, by a British couple known as Patricia and Michael Fogden, whose photography has been on close to 20 different nature magazines, including many National Geo covers. This is the golden toad. One of the reasons that Fauna is in existence, and that this animal, which was very prevalent in the 80s in Costa Rica, is now extinct. No one knows why. It's due to the worldwide decline in amphibians. There's tremendous research being done as to why. Is it ozone-related, climate-related? No one's really quite sure. But this magnificent animal is gone, and these pictures are some of the last ones captured.
Oh, beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And this?
And this is right out of a monster movie, so it seems, but this lizard is called the thorny devil out of Australia. Not something, again, you see in the pet trade, as it's very specific care. It likes super hot desert, 120 some odd degree weather. It's just very comfortable in.
Certainly nothing you could snuggle up to.
Nothing you're going to snuggle up to, no. And a very specific diet that consists mostly of ants that is very hard to keep in captivity if you could keep it hot enough. The interesting thing on the animal is the protuberances you see, particularly around its mouth. It's in an area that has literally no rainfall whatsoever out in the Australian outback. And the only way this animal can drink is for the droplets of dew to condense on its horns, and they dribble down into its mouth. Other than that, it has no way of getting water into its system.
Very interesting, very interesting.
This is the eyelash toad. We have a lot of most of our animals are tropical in origin. This is one of the largest toads in the Amazon. That is a good representation of how big they can get.
That is quite large. Oh, this is a cute little one.
Yeah, and of reptiles, amphibians, insects are a good portion of our pages, but we're interested in all types of fauna as long as it's unusual. This is a silky anteater that probably most people haven't even seen. It's about an 8-inch long animal that lives high in the treetops in the Amazonian rainforest. This is a very rare picture. It's an animal not people know a lot about. Very uncharacteristic as far as the anteater family, in that it looks very cuddly, but it's an animal with big teeth, vicious claws, not something you want to keep again as a pet.
A nice picture, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we're on every continent as far as representing, and this is a leaf-tailed gecko from the island of Madagascar, which is off of Africa. Very interesting place as far as fauna is concerned, in that there's just a tremendous amount of species that have evolved on this island. This leaf-tailed gecko is a master of camouflage. This particular article was called Madagascar's Houdinis. Very misunderstood animal, and unfortunately vanishing from the planet, and this is the only place they exist. And the habitat is just being systematically destroyed there.
Unbelievable. These beautiful pictures, gorgeous pictures. And you brought, speaking of horny little monsters, my God, who is this little guy on the...
Yeah.
This is quite something.
Well, we brought an Amazonian friend here. This is called the mata-mata turtle. That is also an Amazonian animal. If you can get a shot at it, it's got one of the most unusual features.
Just point it right over there.
There you go. We have an article, a matter of fact, in our first issue called Reptile Noses and What They Do. There's a lot of research yet to be done. This one we know that this mata-mata lays in the mud of the Amazon. It has these fleshy appendages here that make it camouflage into the water, into the mud. It lays in wait for anything to come by. It sticks its nose out of the water, just that little tip there if you could see it. Its eyes will be the next thing to pop out. And you see him stretching his neck out. What they do as a fish or whatever comes by is they'll actually just inhale the water and suck in the prey. Very unusual way of gathering food.
So really what we're looking at is mostly neck here.
Yes.
The mouth parts are just a little tiny part up front.
If you could see there, yeah, there's
Just
but
a little
the protuberances and the appendages, it almost looks like it's leaf litter or something hanging off it. That's actually its skin.
Wow,
So-
look at that. Well, where'd you get this guy from?
This is courtesy of the Reptile Center out in Center Reach, which is a pet store owned by Ron Schuster, which specializes in reptiles. Great place to go if you're looking for a pet, in that, unlike your normal pet store chains, the fellas out there really know what they're talking about as far as the husbandry. So I'd recommend a place like that if you're looking to buy a reptile pet. But this isn't something that you'd want to keep.
We're
This
about
is
to
a
lose
very
our little
special
frog
animal.
There you go.
Very special animal as far as the husbandry, and it's an aquatic turtle, would require a massive tank to keep. So this was just a thank you from them, and it's not something that you'll see in any pet store in America.
Well, we're going to take a break here for just a minute and then come back and see some more wonderful little animals, some not so little, as you'll see in a minute. We'll be right back, so stay tuned.